Yeah, Dad. I think this is the thing. When you're outside looking in and you're looking at the writer life, especially if someone to you it looks like they've just come out and they've got into the top 10 and they've got a film adaptation and they're here, there and everywhere. To someone looking in, it looks like it just happened overnight. But from
Yeah.
doing this podcast, and I've made the same assumption, even though I should know better. But I've made the same assumption about some authors, thinking, "Oh, it's just happened overnight." But I've had conversations with them, and you realise it's been this long journey, and they've got spreadsheets calculating all their rejections. It hasn't. It's not a. I woke up on Monday, wrote a book. Friday, I got a deal.
No, I think that's so true. And there are very, very few people who have been incredibly lucky and have, written that first book and had it accepted. They are very, very rare. And, the ones who wrote the book and then got the film deal. And obviously, that's fine.
Yeah,
You don't
fine. It's
take
okay. Nope.
But in all honesty, I actually know a few of those, and I think they've had a tougher time with books 2, 3, and 4 because if you have the kind of magical pathway where you've never had to kind of do the real grit and you have never had to work out that you can write another book and another book and another book and keep trying and keep working on it, second book syndrome is, I think, really tough if you've not had to write another one before. You just don't know if you can do it. And suddenly, you've gone from a book that was your passion project and you've sometimes spent several years writing before you submitted it anywhere. And you then suddenly have to produce one, normally within a year, with loads of feedback coming at you that you have to filter and work out how much you want to take on board. And there's loads of pressure and there are loads of people, suddenly there are eyes on you and you're dealing with reviews coming in for the first time. People saying, "Oh, I just hated it when this woman did this one thing," and you're wondering whether you should think about that in your next book as well. So there's a whole lot of stuff to really work through there. And I actually think that the people who struggle the most are the people who have been the occasional overnight success story, because they've not been in the trenches just working away and working out that they can take feedback and keep going. So there are pluses and minuses to either. And, it'd be lovely to be, the blazing success first time, but I actually think it probably is harder in the long run.
Yeah, there's an author whose name's gone out of my head and her book's gone out of my head. And I think that was similar to her, like her book came out. It might have been like 10 years ago. Everywhere, everyone's talking about it. Because on this side of the ocean, in the States, on Oprah, everyone's talking about it. And then there hasn't been a second book. And you don't know whether it's because you said that first book was the passion project, the one they just thought they were just going to work on. And then maybe someone convinced them to send it to an agent and then it's all spiraled. And they just wasn't ready for that. And that wasn't actually what they wanted.
Yeah. I mean, imagine if literally you just had this one book or this one idea and there really wasn't anything else that you particularly wanted to write at the time, then you suddenly found yourself having to find something. Or I think probably also happens, you had something else, but it was wildly different. And then you're being told by your publishers, quite sensibly, I think, well, we kind of need something that's similar. So you have a brand, because otherwise it's going to really confuse readers, which is completely fair. But you don't have anything that's similar. And then you're trying to find something in a hurry with all this pressure on you. So I think that probably is a really hard thing. And there's probably way more pressure on you to produce an amazing second book if your first book has gone, sort of stratospherically well than there is for those of us who, who've done, fine, but not, been in the millions. So I think it's a funny old game, the publishing industry. I think there's a lot more to consider than just, how well that first book does.
There's a lot emotionally, I think, to deal with, regardless of whatever, because you may have been, I always say this, you could have been highly proficient in your whatever career you've had prior to your writing career. You could be head of your department, running a department, but then you come into this publishing work and you have no experience of it. You only, I always say, your only experience of it is probably what you've seen on TV and the fact that you've written a book. And then it's a lot to take on board when you realize it's not just about the book when it's published, it's now about you and then what the expectations are of you.
Yeah. Don't you feel it's a weirdly powerless situation given how much depends on you, isn't it? That so much depends on all these other factors. And I think in a way that in most jobs, I don't think there is that same sense of powerlessness. So it is a weird kind of mental shift to feeling like it sometimes, it doesn't matter how hard you work. you're not necessarily going to be able to make mega sales this one year if the market is looking for what you've written, or if it just so happens that, you know, retailers aren't keen on it, or whatever it is. There are so many different pieces. So you're right, you could be, you know, incredibly senior at what you do in another career in another field, and feel very much in control of that, and then suddenly find yourself knowing nothing about this new field, and then having to learn and having to kind of just go with the flow, which is and I don't know about you, but my coping strategy is just to constantly ask questions and be obsessed with the data. Like, that's definitely my coping strategy, and I'm very
mine is to learn. It's like, because same thing. I don't like not knowing or not understanding, and so my thing was, okay, I need to find out everything I possibly can, and I don't care if it's a very basic, like, paint by numbers like list of what you need to know. That's how I deal with things. I don't like that not knowing, because I've known what to do before.
No, I'm the same. And I think also different editors and agents work differently. Some like to tell you everything. Some would prefer you not to know too much because they feel they're kind of protecting you. I'm sort of lucky in that my editors sort of align with me in that, you know, he's very happy to tell me what's going on all the time, and that's great. I love it.
Yeah.
But I'm probably very annoying because I'm always like, oh, so how many of these did we sell? What did that mean? And where's that going?
You need to know.
We need to know.
So many authors, they know they're walking into the next book and the next book, and like, I've known authors who, like, we debuted at the same time, and to this day they still have no idea what their numbers are, and I'm like,
wow,
you need to know, and they should be, even if it's like you just sold 2. Someone needs to tell you just sold 2, so you can adjust your expectations.
It's sort of like never having a performance review and not knowing how much you're going to get paid in the next couple of years, basically, isn't it? Because it does affect how much you're going to get offered next time, and it really does affect where your whole career is going. So yeah, that's quite amazing, not knowing any figures at all. I mean, you probably don't necessarily need to know as many as I always want to know, but somewhere in the middle, you know.
Yeah, I want an idea. I would like an idea. So, Gytha, how would you describe your publishing journey?
Lengthy. I'm definitely someone who always knew I wanted to be an author. I don't know if you were the same, but I always wanted to do it. So I wrote a first novel when I was 14, and obviously it was awful, but I thought it was great. So I sent it to really senior editor at Transworld, who
you sent it out.
Totally sent it out. Yeah, I had great plans, and this editor, who was basically was a very, very lovely person. He rang me up to tell me why it was not good enough, but was very encouraging.
Oh, that's nice. They took the time.
I know, what an amazing person. And he told me lots of really useful things, you know, like about, you know, some bits that were overwritten, but the things that were really good, and the way to kind of, you know, way he thought I should go. And he said he'd love to see a book for me in a few years once I'd, you know, and then sadly he then retired before I was sort of really ready. But it was incredibly, it really did keep me going when I had rejection after rejection later, without, you know, anyone saying more than just, you know, this is not for us, because I felt like there had been something there, and I had some promise. And then I got into theatre writing when I was at university, and that was incredibly helpful, because theatre is all about feedback. You know, you get told all the time whether people like your stuff or what they think is wrong with it. And I think that does lots of things for you. It improves you because, you know, there's this constant feedback. You get to kind of watch it play out. You get to watch whether things work. The audience tells you things, the lighting guy tells you things, the actors tell you things, the critics tell you things. And then you get to work out which feedback to take on board and which just to let wash over you. And I think that's such an important part of being a writer, because everyone will always have an opinion, but some of those opinions will literally be telling you more about that person than they will be telling you about your work. You know, such as, you know, I've had one book where a couple of the reviews were, you know, well, I only gave this, you know, 3 stars because I don't like when a woman gets drunk, for example. And that's, you know, valid feedback, but it's about what that person feels. Other people who just said, you know, this book was too long for me. And that just means that that's, it is just too long a book read for them. Other people said they wanted it to be longer. You're never going to please anyone, and I think the really valuable thing for me was learning that there are some things to take on board, and every piece of feedback is saying something. It's always telling you something, but it's working out which bits are I should change what I'm doing and which bits are that's just about them.
Yeah, it's good that you had that experience with the playwriting, working in the theatre prior to becoming, say, a published author, because there's going to be so many writers who they have no experience of that kind of feedback. Even if I think about being a lawyer, I don't get no. My feedback is if the verdict that a jury returns, or if a judge agrees to grant my application or not. No one's actually critiquing me on my oratory skills or my actual written skills in an application. So your feedback is, and it's not to do with me, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Whereas when you're an author, it seems that all of the feedback, as you said, it's different categories to it. There are some people who can be objective and talk about the book, but there are some who can't be objective and it becomes subjective. It's all about you as a person, and then it's hard to feel if you've got no experience of that. It's hard to, I don't know, remove your emotions from it.
It really is. And I think the biggest thing is just to remember that although it feels like a personal attack, it's never a personal attack. It's just, it's the whole culture of reviews is people just being able to say whether they liked something or not in order to guide other people. And that review may tell someone, it may have been a terrible review that they said, I hated this, this, and this. And those things are all something that someone reading really likes and make them actually want to buy the book. So it's, that, and that's just how reviews work. And I think just knowing that and realizing that it's okay is really important. And one of the, honestly, the most valuable piece of advice I have is just really, really, really to have very little interaction with reviews in general. What I mostly do is have a kind of general look at kind of trends, like to think, okay, overall, how's this book doing? Is it kind of doing better or worse than the last one in terms of star ratings? Are there a few things that kind of to pick out that people are overall saying that are helpful? And then if I want to feel better about myself, I just filter the reviews by 5 stars only, and I have a little look and go, yeah, I'm so great. Then,
I encourage everyone to do that. Just select, filter, 5 stars. You don't need
5 stars
the
only.
the 1 and 2 stars don't concern you.
No, that's where that book was not for them, and that's okay.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're getting tons of them, you might want to think, oh, maybe this one didn't land for some reason. But also, I'd rather get 5 stars and 1 stars than get loads of 3 stars, because at least you're causing people to really have an emotional response, right?
Yeah.
So
when I first saw you in 2019 at First Crime, so you said it's prior to publication. So in that moment, before the book's actually published, so this is before She Lies in Wait comes out, did you have any expectations, or were you just, I'm just going to just wait and see how it all goes?
Yeah, it's very, very interesting because by that point, because you get some information, I think, from editors and agents. Mine being very open, to sort of said, so here's the situation. We're in these retailers, which has gone really well. We're in supermarkets for the hardback, which is great. Looking at the placements, we probably won't chart. It'd be in the top 10, but it's looking solid. Like we'll do well. Which was so helpful because it meant I wasn't stressing about being in the top 10, but I knew that they were happy with how it was, with not being in the top 10. And in the end, we came in at number 13 in hardback, and they were like, that's really good for this first book being out, blah, blah, blah. They told me, you didn't have any huge promotions behind it, so that's really solid. And so they managed my expectations very well. And I think that made that whole first process really easy for me. I think, conversely, I do know other people who went in just assuming that you have to chart, and if you don't chart, you failed, and then felt terribly disappointed at coming further down. And that actually that's not what their editors or anyone in the system was actually looking at for them. They weren't looking to chart because that hardback was coming out to get attention on it, to get readers, to get reviews, and that what they're really looking is just to build some momentum to later down the line have a paperback that really succeeded. And that was fine. And in fact, for us, it didn't matter that hardback hadn't charted, because later on the paperback did. So it's all those two kind of the two sides to it, the paperback versus the hardback, and having that all explained to you. So expectation, I think, is all about knowledge, and it's all about how much people are willing to share. So I think I also, because I think I got so accustomed to things not quite working out for me during my journey to being published. So, eventually got this fabulous agent. Very first book that we submitted didn't get any contracts, didn't get any deals. So then I spent, a good couple of years writing a new book and then editing it. And then, so by the time I got that, I was hugely excited at getting a deal, but I sort of had in mind that maybe it'd be disappointing again because I got so used to the knockback. So I guess that also informed my sense of, well, we'll see. So I guess that was all really, really helpful for me. Like, both the fact that I kind of had a slight sense of don't rely on this, and also the fact that I'd been pre-prepped pretty well.
How do you keep going though? In those moments when you said you've been working in the book and you've signed with the agent. I always say the agent is always the big hurdle. And I think for a lot of people, you think once you've signed with the agent and the rest of it is just going to be easy. You'll get the deal and your career is going to go off. And then for so many people, they get the agent, but it's still a really hard slog between getting an agent and actually finding a publisher. And for some authors, there's one or two books that have been rejected before they get the deal. So how did you keep going in those moments?
Honestly, for that I found incredibly hard. Because I didn't know enough about the industry, I honestly thought I'd completely failed at that point. I was convinced my career was over until my brilliant agent rang me up and just said, this happens all the time. A lot of my clients, we sell their second book and not their first book, even their third book. And she said, I'm going to be in your life for a long time. So you don't worry. You pitched me an amazing idea for a second book. Write that one. And that was fantastic. It did take me a while to get back off the floor and actually write that second one. It didn't help that, I had other stuff going on in my life. I had a small kid. I had, relationship stuff to manage. But to be honest, most of it was just rebuilding that confidence after I felt I'd failed. And it, for me as well, interestingly, I had a whole other little failure in the middle because I had a fantasy book that I'd written whilst waiting for my submission to come back for the crime book. I'd written it all on Wattpad and I'd had some interest from some editors about maybe looking at publishing that one. And I got really, really close to that. And then it didn't come off. So I then felt I'd double failed. So I failed in two directions.
It's amazing how much pressure we can put on ourselves.
I know. It's mad. So I think that didn't help as well, and that then sort of failed whilst I was trying to write the second book. But then in the end, I was really, really pleased with how that second book came out. And then that ended up being She Lies in Wait, which is my debut.
Yeah.
And it was clearly a more polished, more successful book than the first book we pitched would have been, because I was more ready and I learnt more along the way. So there are lots of good sides as well, even though I wouldn't recommend trying to, double fail and still keep going. It turned out actually to be fine. And I'd love to tell people that actually the bits where you think you're never going to have a career, they're unlikely to be true. And as long as you stick at it and keep going and learn, take the feedback. And one of the things I really learned was how to edit properly, actually. I'd started off when I was editing the first one, I kept sort of tinkering around the edges of it and not doing these big structural changes that needed to happen. And during the process of all that, I learned how to do a proper edit, which was so valuable for later. So, there's some really good sides.
Yeah, I just think, like, if anyone takes anything away from this conversation, I think it's the importance of having knowledge. Like, you don't need to have an encyclopedic amount of knowledge about the industry, but you do need to know the basics. You need your agent to explain to you how the submission process works and how, rejection from publishers, it is normal. So don't be completely disheartened if someone doesn't bite at the first submission. And you need to know when you are published how numbers work and most importantly, what the expectations are from you.
Yeah, I think all of that, and the more communication there is, I think the better. And some people say, I just don't want to know, and that's fine. But as long as you know what it is that they are looking for, then you know that you haven't failed when you think you have, or the likelihood of a temporary failure turning into success, which is so often what it's about. It's okay, maybe not this, but that. Maybe not this time, but next time. Maybe not this editor, but that editor, because you only need one editor to really love what you do to make it work.
Thank you so much for watching this clip from the Conversation podcast. If you'd like to see the full episode, you can watch it right now here on my channel. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe so you never miss a conversation. And if you'd like to catch up on more conversations, you'll find them linked on your screen now. And you can also listen to the podcast on your favourite platform. See you there. Bye.